1. Once upon a time, Toshiba made a very nice dot matrix printer called the P351. 24, count 'em, 24 pins of punchy tungsten points that enabled a huge variety of visual beauty on the printed page. But was mainly just used for underlining sometimes. There was a color-capable version too, the P351C. But as this was the era of CGA and EGA video, no one in the offices knew what colors were yet, and proceeded to just wear out the black section of the ribbon. The P351 was the pride of any office it graced for producing correspondence, and it had accessories too. The favorite one was the automatic sheet feeder for loading A4 paper when a job was sent, and loading a second sheet for the second page. I won't overwhelm you with the technical detail of what occurs when a third page is sent for printing from the document. In these golden days of 1990 or 91, one particular P351, resplendent with ASF, was matched with a fully functioning 286 with WordPerfect 5.1, which for you youngsters out there is a word processor. Not one of these new-fangled desktop publishing rigs with WYSIWYG functions, but rather a column on the left that showed how many lines of text would be sent to the printer. 66 lines of text on your screen, lined up with the 66 lines of printed text on the paper. Line 67 would be the top of the second page. Now we get to the tech support part. On this occasion, the customer reported the fault that a single-page document would, on occasion, print the last line of a page, example line 66, as a single line at the top of the second page. I won't bore you with how long it took to see the fault, let alone how long it took to test. Suffice to say, it was a painful process. And it didn't happen if you just created your own document with 1 to 66 listed on the page. Oh, no. It had to be an actual letter full of words, line spaces, and carriage returned slowly and noisily delivered to the A4 sheet of paper. You're probably thinking, well, it's obviously the automatic sheet feeder, and so did I until the replacement ASF did the same thing. Probably paper dust on the sensors, you counter. There was not a speck in that device when I finished servicing and cleaning it. He even used the multimeter on the paper out switch to make sure it was seeing open and close reliably. Guess what it was? The paper out switch was mounted in a way so that a length of thin steel poked through a window, and was pushed by the paper surface when present to close the switch via lever action. Well, that lever is bent, you say, to which I say it wasn't, and also ask you to stop interrupting. Ideally, the lever, thin, pokey steel piece meets the surface of the paper perpendicular. There is only one screw mount, so it's possible for the whole switch to pivot on the screw and be at something other than a right angle. But it pokes through a window, so the angle is restricted by the presence of the edge of the hole. By being on an angle, even a slight one, changes the distance ever so slightly on the end of the lever, so the lower edge of the paper is being detected fractionally before it would if the lever was perpendicular. Just the switch so it's straight. Next story, you rudely interject. That's half of the story. Keep reading this one. The customer has just received 150 reams of letterhead paper from the cheaper overseas supplier. A4 paper is 297 millimeters tall, or 11 3/4 inches. This new paper was both inconsistently milled and cut for length, but also had tiny variations in the edge too, so it was not perfectly straight. The printer was in spec, but the paper was not. The extra page with a single line of text did still happen, but not as often as it did before the switch was aligned. And Loctite was required to make sure it didn't move. But the issue remained as long as they continued using that paper. 2. So this is from when I was working the tech support and service department of a well-known big-box electronics retailer, whose uniform is blue polos and khakis. We have a client who brings their computer in for it not working. Well, sure enough, plug it in, hit the switch, and nothing. It's an integrated system where you have to do a pretty thorough teardown to remove any component or connection. I mention this because under different circumstances I would use a test power supply and would remove the hard drive to see if it works. As that was not possible in a reasonable amount of time, I move on to explaining the prices of a diagnostic. Since I can't pull the hard drive to see if it's working, I strongly recommend that she also get a data backup, even though it's unlikely the drive has failed. Now, at the time, there were 2 data backups that we offered. One was limited, ran $100. The other was called unlimited and ran $150. The difference is that the limited is done on DVDs, while the unlimited included a 500GB hard drive. The limited data back was technically limited to 8.4 GB on 2 disks, but we could fudge it and do 4 or 5 disks without an issue. So I asked the customer how much data they had on the hard drive. "I have a couple of pictures and some Word documents," was her answer. "Cool, so I can sign her up for the limited backup. Achieve authorization to do the data transfer, get the service order written up, collect payment, and have her sign everything. Get everything checked in, give her the client copies, and get everything set up." When we went to do the backup, we discovered that her documents folder was over 400 GB in size. We can't do that on DVDs. And we can't just take a hard drive and add it to the service order. We needed her to come in and sign an updated service order. The ops agents called her, no answer, and they leave a message. 2 days, no answer. We send an email and call her, no answer. And again we leave a message. 2 more days, still no answer. We again send an email and call and leave a message. 2 more days. This went up for 24 days. Multiple messages, multiple emails. No responses to any of them. Finally, she comes into the store and wants to pick up her computer. We go to explain the situation to her. She wants to know why we didn't call her. I tell her that we had called multiple times and left multiple messages. She said she never got any calls. I pull the call log and show her the number we called. She confirmed that it was her cell phone. I ask her if she has her cell phone with her. She does. I ask to see it. I quickly indicate the 99+ missed calls indicator on her screen. "Oh, I never answer a call from a number I don't recognize. I figure if it's important they will leave a message." She says, "Okay, not unreasonable." I then indicate the 99+ voicemails indicator. "Oh, I never listen to those. I figure if it's important they will call back," she says. This is about the point where I think my brain literally broke and I had to take a moment to reset. I return to explaining the backup situation. We've already agreed to eat the $50 difference at this point, just to get the ticket closed, so it will stop killing our turn time. So she wouldn't need to pay anything. This seemed to be a non-issue for her, right up until we mentioned the 24 to 48 hour turnaround time. Apparently, she was not going to accept any option that didn't end in her walking out with her computer in working order within the hour. So I'm going to abbreviate at this point. She demanded to see the manager. The manager kinda changed the laws of physics, and isn't inclined to bump other machines from the line for someone that is screaming at him, so no change. We can cancel the order, refund her money, and she can take her non-working computer, or she can give us the 48 hours to do the data transfer and diagnostics. There really isn't another option. She leaves in a huff, saying she's going to call the cops. Surprise! 2 days later, we actually have a visit from the cops investigating a complaint that we had stolen her computer. I don't know exactly what occurred, but the store manager asked for the records. I grabbed them, and an hour later, the cops left, and the store manager said, "No worries, have a good day." When I left that store a year and a half later, that computer was still in holding. No idea whatever happened to it. 3. I was reminded of this story recently, but it happened about 6 or 7 years ago. I was working for the tech services section of a prominent big box retailer with blue shirts. I was working a morning shift that day, so in at 9 a.m. I had checked in a lady that morning for some issues with her laptop. Now, the way this works is I spend 10 to 15 minutes with the client to get an understanding of what the problem is, then create a service order. When the computer gets checked in, it gets flagged for diagnostics or evaluation. Eval is for when the computer either cannot turn on or cannot connect to the network. That was not the issue with this computer, which meant her computer was flagged for diags. When a computer is flagged for diags, it gets plugged into the network and remote tech starts the battery of software diags on it. Depending on the condition of the computer, the diagnostics can take between 4 and 12 hours, so it's 4 to 12 hours and then someone actually goes to work on it. I told the client that right now we're looking at a 2 to 3 day turnaround. I like to underpromise. So there's an open connection. I slide it in, connect the cables and queue it up. Typically, someone will start the diagnostics in 15 to 30 minutes at that point. So the client got checked in at like 10 or 10:30 in the morning, or in the afternoon, she calls in wanting to know why they haven't started on her laptop. Okay, it's a bit odd, but not totally unheard of. She may have simply assumed we hadn't started since we haven't called, so I go back and check. And yeah, the diagnostics are running. It's also no longer queued. Someone may have moved the laptop and interrupted the connection, or the computer charger lost connection or something. It happens sometimes. I apologize for the delay and make a note to confirm that it is queued up, the connections are tight, and that it is flagged for diagnostics. And ready to go, and that a tech should be starting the diagnostics any time now. Just to make sure there isn't a problem, I ping the tech line and ask them to confirm the unit is queued. They see it and it's in line to be started. Should be started in about 5 minutes. Finish out my shift, leave for the day. I come back the next day, first call of the day, some lady wanting to know why we haven't started work on their computer. Okay, this is somewhat unusual. I go and look at her computer and it's no longer queued, and don't have any diagnostic results. Okay, something is going on. I once more apologize to the client, explain that something atypical is going on, and I'm going to look into it. I re-queue, ping the tech line, confirm that they can see it, that it is responding to the ping request, and ask them to prioritize the diagnostics so I can personally confirm that the diagnostics have been started. Pull a few strings and I get it to go through. I see the diagnostics starting. I make a note of the time and service order. Okay, good to go. I go back to the counter. Rest of my shift goes off without issue and I leave for the day. I come back the next day and there's a message from the client who is absolutely livid that we haven't started working her system. What? I'm trying to figure out how she got that impression. If she called after I left, the other members of the department would have told her that the diagnostics were running or were done and what the results were. I personally saw the diagnostics started, so I know they got started. I go to look at the computer, fully expecting to see a nice, detailed, multi-page diagnostics report. All set to contact the client and find out what... There's nothing. The diagnostics were not finished. It's no longer queued. There are no notes on the service order. What the hell? I ping the tech line and ask for the access log in that connection. Okay, it lost the connection about 4:30 the afternoon before. Ugh. That means the diagnostics were running for over 6 hours but didn't finish. Otherwise, I could view the report. I call the client back, apologize for the delay, explain that I personally saw the diagnostics started and something knocked the computer off the connection about 6 hours later. Given that the computer had now been here for 48 hours, it is now a priority ticket. So I grab one of the techs, explain the situation, and tell them I want to set the laptop up on the desktop shelf so the techs can keep an eye on it. We move it, set it up, re-queue it, ping the tech line again, explain that it is now a priority, get the diagnostics rolling on it, make a note of it in the service order, and we go about the rest of our day. 2:15 rolls around, and the tech flags me down and explains that he just saw a laptop drop the connection and switch to a remote desktop connection. As we're looking at the computer, we see someone is accessing the computer, and the remote software has knocked off our remote connection. Almost on cue, the phone rings. I answer it. It's the client, who is livid that we still have not started work on her computer. "Ma'am, do you use remote desktop software in your computer?" I ask. "Yes, it's how I know you morons haven't started working on my computer," she shrieks in the phone. "And you were just using it to look at your computer, I presume?" I ask. "Yes, why?" she demands. And you used it yesterday, about 4:30, I'm guessing?
What difference does that make?
I'm just trying to figure out what it is that keeps preventing us from completing the first step in the repair process. Did you use it about 4:30 yesterday? I ask a bit more sternly.
Yes, I guess it was about then, she finally concedes.
Please hold for just a minute. I put her on the phone and ask the tech how she could be accessing the computer through the remote desktop when our network is isolated. He ponders it for a moment and thinks the desktop could be connecting to the public Wi-Fi. I ask him to get TechLine to launch the diagnostic software. He does so while I go to disable the wireless adapter. Normally, when we launch the diagnostic system, it disables all the other network connections, but the Ethernet connection, unless we tell it to test those connections. Apparently it wasn't doing it this time. I nod and go back to the customer. All right, ma'am, I need your help with something real quick. Would you please try to access your computer via your remote desktop software, I ask.
What are you doing? Why aren't you working on my computer?
Yes, ma'am, I am testing a theory about why we have not been able to complete the work on your computer. Would you please try to access your computer via your remote desktop software?
Fine.
A moment or two goes by.
What the hell? I can't access it now. What did you do? It was working just a few minutes ago. What did you do? You have to fix it now.
Yes, ma'am. Your remote desktop software was interrupting our diagnostic software and crashing the process, forcing us to start over a process that looks to take about 8 or 9 hours to complete.
What do you mean?
We have started the diagnostic process 4 times now. 3 of those times you have accessed your computer via your remote desktop software and broke our connection to our diagnostics. To be blunt, you are the reason we have been unable to complete our diagnostics on your computer. Now that I have disabled your wireless adapter, your computer is no longer connected to the internet, allowing us to do the work you have asked us to do. Because your computer has been here for more than 48 hours, it is now a priority ticket. That being said, we are still looking at 8 to 12 hours to finish the diagnostics and to identify the problem, and then we can fix the problem. So the estimated turnaround time at this point is 24 hours, I explained. The problem with her computer was she had 2 pieces of malware that the automatic repairs, which were the last step of the diagnostics, dealt with. So if she had just not used the remote desktop system, it would have been done that first morning. 4. This particular story is from when I worked for a particular well-known tech support and service center attached to a big-box retail company with a propensity for blue. Every once in a while, a customer says or does something that just makes your day. I walked up to the next client to find that it was a husband and wife couple that had brought their computer in because they were having trouble with their internet. It became very evident very quickly that the wife was going to do the majority of the talking. She was one of those people who can speak for 10 minutes to tell you her name. So, among her long ramblings, I figure out we were having a problem with their internet. Specifically, she feels it is too slow to connect. Okay, no problem. I hooked the system up to the test station to see what I could see. While I was doing that, the wife continued to explain how they had just upgraded their service package with their internet provider, and that included such and such a speed, and included this new router, and just on and on and on. I kind of set my brain to listen to everything she said, but honestly, I was just filtering what she was saying. She was going on about how much they were paying for their internet, and how much they and their kids use the internet and what they use it for. And they signed up for the package, and they got this new router with that package, but they didn't get rid of the old one, and on and on and on. And then she said it. I should be able to click on the thing and bam! I have cocks in my face! Her husband responded sooner than I did with a snicker. It took me a moment to process it, and when I did, all I could do was a full lockdown in my brain to prevent myself from saying something that would likely end badly. 5. Had a noteworthy event a while back I thought many people here would get a kick out of. I work as the IT tutor at my school, and as part of that I handle any intro to programming appointments that we get. The class isn't really intended to teach you how to program in a given language, though it does use Python, but rather to introduce you to the basic programming concepts of variables, data types, loops, functions, classes, etc. So I had a student come in, basically at her wit's end, borderline in tears. Short of the long, 5 weeks into the class and she was not understanding the concepts and it was really frustrating her. Okay, so I hung her down and start working with her. In this case, focusing on loops as that's chapter 6 in the book. She seems to sort of be getting it, if I hold her hand and lead her through it. 30 minutes in and we haven't really made any progress. I took a step back and started working with her on comparison operations. She wasn't really getting that either. She is getting more frustrated. So I try to get her mind off the material for a moment. Her phone flashes a reminder about D&D party tonight. So I ask if she plays D&D. She does. And we chat briefly about the campaign she's in. She plays a rogue, go figure. Then I hit on an idea. You know, a lot of early programmers were RPG players, and because of that, a lot of what developed into modern programming was influenced and based on RPG mechanics. She looked at me like I'm making a really bad setup for an even worse joke. I'm serious. How do you determine if you pass or fail a stat test? I ask. Well, you determine what you need to roll over to pass, roll a dice, add any modifiers you have, and compare that to the first number, she explains more energetically. So you perform a comparison operation. Well, no, I mean, kind of. Wait! She stammers out. Her response was interspersed as she thought and talked at the same time. I go right on the whiteboard. If dice roll plus modifiers less than equals needed roll, you pass, else you fail. She looked at it for a long moment. You could see the gears turning in her head. So the variable dice roll is added to the variable modifiers. And that's compared to the needed roll. If the needed roll is higher, you fail, otherwise you pass. She parses out, once more thinking and speaking at the same time. Yeah, and what about this one? I ask as I write on the board. While enemy attack equals true, player.cast shield. She looks at it for a minute. So as long as the enemy is attacking, cast the shield spell, she says. Nice, how about this one? For each enemy in horde, if player.hp less than enemy.defense, target enemy equals true, while target enemy equals true, player.attack sword enemy. For each army in the horde, check to see if the player hit points are greater than the enemy's defense. If it is, target the enemy. As long as that enemy is targeted, attack them. And you just work through a while loop nested inside of a control statement that was inside of a while loop. I explain. What? She says aghast. She quickly turns back to the board and starts studying the examples intensely. I can see her eyes traveling across what I wrote. So this one is just a comparison operator? She asks, pointing to the dice roll I wrote out before. Yep, I respond. And this is just a while loop that would tell the player character to cast a shield spell? She asks, sounding more confident. Yep. Her entire face lights up in that unmistakable look of the light bulb turning on. We start hammering through more examples of loops and control statements, fluctuating between the requirements of her assignments and using RPG examples. It's a fun day when you get to talk about dragons and knights, and actually have it be work-related. So I guess it all depends on what material you use to explain it, right? Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Terrific Tales of Technology, episode 24. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Do I have any shout-outs? Well, I would like to give a specific shout-out to the author of not only the last story, but a number of stories there. Toro is Prime. Toro is Prime. Thank you very much. They were very generous, and they gave me not only tech support stories, which will let me finish that video, but also some retail stories as well, and I think a malicious compliance revenge story as well that will pop up in a future video. So I'm very grateful to all your help, because that's good stories, good length, and it saves me a lot of time in searching in the upcoming week as well. So it gets me started on the next videos. And I think I'm gonna wrap things up there for now, because it's been a long recording session for me. I did 3 videos, audio one after the other there. So I'm gonna rest my voice and the rest of me. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.